This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. Full house tonight, good panel, an important discussion. Just last month, a federal judge dismissed a lawsuit here in Tennessee that would have halted refugee resettlement. Today, President Trump said he's mobilizing the National Guard to go down to the border. There's a lot to talk about as far as this whole issue is concerned. We want to talk about it today. Happy to have with us first Lisa Sherman, Policy Director with Tennessee Immigrant Rights and Refugee Coalition. Lisa, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We have Tom Costelli, Legal Director for the ACLU. Thank you, Tom, for being here.
Absolutely.
And Binyad Sharif, a Muslim refugee from Iraq. You've been impacted by some of what has happened of late, and thank you for being here, sharing your story.
Thank you.
So, Lisa, I want to start with you. Your concerns, this lawsuit, what you're seeing with President Trump's announcement today, just in general, with what we're seeing across the country and here in Tennessee as it pertains to refugees, what are your concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, refugees have traditionally enjoyed widespread support in the communities here across the United States. But over the past few years, we've really seen this fringe, extreme voice really feeding people's fears and anxieties about changing demographics and people from foreign countries. And so this has really impacted refugees themselves who live here, who call Tennessee home, who've been here for years and who are now U.S. citizens. And we've seen increased discrimination and harassment and even bullying from schools, you know, all the way up to the highest levels. And also we've seen families be torn apart because they can't reunite with their loved ones who are back in their home countries waiting to be resettled here. And so it's been a really a time of high anxiety and high stress for a lot of people who love this country and who want to be able to live here freely and in peace.
And you said fringe, but what we had with this lawsuit, there was a resolution that was passed by the entire Tennessee legislature. And essentially they wanted to halt all refugee resettlement to the state until associated costs were paid by the federal government. You're with the ACLU, you fought against this lawsuit, judge dismissed it. But when the entire legislature begins passing stuff like this, it's not fringe in a way. It's becoming more and more mainstream, it seems, right?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, a majority of the legislature passed it, probably more than a majority, but you know, just wasn't unanimous. But I think that's what Lisa was saying, is that, you know, while this, you know, for a long time, refugees enjoyed widespread support, and then this animosity started growing from fringe groups, and now it's kind of entered the mainstream, and including, you know, the President of the United States, who's enacting policies that are affecting refugees negatively.
What was the big concern with this lawsuit? And again, a judge dismissed it, and I'm taking one line of it, but to halt all refugee resettlement until the states all associated costs are paid for by the federal government. This was seeking to halt refugee resettlement. Talking about, I guess, states' rights type thing. What was the concern here?
Well, I mean, yes, exactly what the lawsuit was doing was trying to essentially declare the 1980 Refugee Resettlement Act unconstitutional under a states' rights and spending clause theory, which can get really esoteric into the details of that, but that's basically what it was. So the reason why ACLU and Turk wanted to get involved in that lawsuit to defend against it was because it would shut down the program. It would shut down this program that's been providing refugees from across in the world a place to come and stay, and it would also set a bad trend across the United States of having one state being able to say to the federal government on something that the Constitution says is within the strict purview of the federal government, that is immigration, that the states have a veto and can say, well, you're not allowed to resettle refugees in our state. So another reason why we wanted to get involved in this lawsuit in particular is it was the first of its kind. And we knew that if it were successful, we would see lawsuits popping up around the country. So kind of wanted to make our best effort to defeat it out of the gate.
Could there be an appeal?
Certainly there could be an appeal, and that would go to the Sixth Circuit, and we'd see what the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals has to say.
And what do you know some numbers as far as the number of refugees and immigrants that are resettled in Tennessee, and what do you think is is the reason for this shift in public opinion that we appear to be seeing. You said you're concerned about it, but what are some hard numbers?
Yeah. So in 2016, we had a little over 2,000 refugees resettled in Tennessee, and they mostly go to cities like Memphis and Nashville and Knoxville and Chattanooga, so mostly urban areas where there's a lot of infrastructure and support to help them get settled and to be able to stand on their feet and get jobs and all of that. And then last year, I believe it was a little bit over 1,000. And then this year, because of the federal government's reduction of the number of refugees that we'll be taking into the country as a whole, we're only really on track to resettle about 500 this year. So it's severely cut the number of refugees and the number of people that we'll be helping to flee persecution and violence.
Do you think people understand that? 2,000 doesn't seem like a lot.
No, it's really not a lot, especially when you look at how they're spread across the different areas and the number of resettlement agencies. We had about, I think, 6 resettlement agencies here in Tennessee. Unfortunately, World Relief Nashville, who had been in service for 30 years, had to close its doors last year because of the drastic number of refugees who were cut from the program. And Catholic Charities has had to cut its percentage as well by 30%, or cut its staff by 30%. Which is really tragic. These are faith-based organizations that are looking to serve the world's most vulnerable people.
This is a time when the world is facing a huge displacement of people, right? The largest displacement since World War II. There are millions of refugees in the world. At the same time, we seem to be in this country, there's this debate and maybe there's misinformation. On the other hand, there is fear, I guess, about jobs and terrorism and other things. Why is it important? What do you want people to know? And of course I want to hear Binyad's story here, but what do you want people to know about why it's important to accept refugees? Why continue these programs?
Yeah. Well, I think it reflects our highest values and ideals as a country, that we're a beacon of hope to people seeking refuge from persecution and violence. It's the essence of who we are as Americans, that we can provide that safe haven. And it saves lives, literally saves lives. More than 3 million refugees have been resettled in the United States since the 1970s. And these people have been able to rebuild their lives, to establish their families, to get jobs, to give back to this country. I just spoke to a refugee this week who came to this country at 6 years old, and he served in the US military because he loves this country. And so I think, it's what makes us as America great to be able to be this refuge for people.
And are you concerned by what you're seeing? Are you concerned that's in jeopardy?
Absolutely. We see that in jeopardy just by the number of refugees that have been cut from the program or not allowed into this country. I think every American should be extremely concerned about the perception that this sends to the rest of the country or the rest of the world, about who we are and our values, and to the refugees who are citizens now who call this country home. What kind of message does that send them? How does that make them feel? That alienates them.
And why do you think it's happening?
I think it's happening because a very powerful group of people have used people's natural fears and anxieties about people who are different, people who practice a different religion, come from different countries. They've exploited those natural fears with misinformation in order to gain, political gain. And so rather than inform their constituents and give them hard facts, rather than help refugees and receiving communities connect and get to know each other, they've really divided that line in order to advance their own ideology or their own campaigns.
And Binyad, you were impacted directly by this, right? How were you impacted?
I was impacted by there was an executive order last year banning people from 7 majority Muslim countries to enter the United States in any shape or form. And the reason how I got impacted was, and I'm going to go back in time a little bit, my father in Iraq, he served with the US government. He was a translator with them and served during the toughest times of the Iraq War, despite being in danger because of his affiliation. And that work put himself and his family, me and my sisters and my mother, in danger. We were, this sounds crazy, but we were basically on target lists of extremist people. My father's colleagues were, some of them were assassinated even. And after the years passed, after, for example, the US military left and chaos ensued more in Iraq, a program was created by the US government to resettle allies of the US government in Iraq. It was called a Special Immigrant Visa Program, and we were essentially part of that program to be resettled here in the United States. And we got our visas at the end of 2016, and when there was talks of this travel ban being issued or being signed, we never thought that it would affect us. We thought it would be something to keep like some of the more people who without background checks, or people who the United States government doesn't know, for example, enough. But we were essentially on the airplane coming to the United States or making our first trip when this order was signed. So we were stuck, we were blocked in our layover in Cairo to change planes to come to the United States, and it was there that we received the news that we had been ordered to not be able to come here.
You were that close?
We were that close, yes. 10 hours, if we had traveled 10 hours before that, it would have...
You would have been in?
We would have been in, it was, yes. So at that time, we were just thinking about that, and like no matter how much hindsight we had, it was not going to help us at the time, because it had been done and we had been going to be sent away back to Iraq.
Now you obviously made it in, and I want to explore all of that more, but what do you think about what is happening? Some of the things you're hearing in the news, I mean, there's this lawsuit that we've talked about, there's, you know, the news today about troops going down to the border. What do you think about some of the things you're hearing in the news of late? Yeah,
I think it's things like border control and background checks. These are, of course, very important things, and people know about this throughout history. This is not something new that we have to protect our borders right now. I think what I think right now is that it's being extremely exaggerated, that the things that are in the measurements and control that are in control right now are satisfactory, and that I feel like all this there's a overhype of the creating a threat level of threat that doesn't really exist, and that I feel is a bit dangerous.
All right, we're going to take a break. I want to talk more about your fascinating story, and I want to hear from you all. So there's the number 615-737+, 615-737-7587. We have put this first part on Facebook Live on our main Facebook page. We are going to end that feed. You can watch it on our webpage. You can turn over streaming this on our webpage, or come on over to News Channel 5 Plus, where you can call in and give your comments. Take a break. Be back right after this.